Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to the Lenko Show, the place where we talk all things human performance. We want to help you get the very, very best out of yourself, whether it's for sporting purposes or just for living your best life. Today, I am your host. I am Alex, and I will be joined by Paralympic track cycling athlete Sam Ruddock. So, Sam is one hell of a guy. So I'm very excited to actually sit down and speak with him and for you to get some pearls of wisdom from him and understand what life is like as an athlete and doing everything that he does. So he's represented Team GB in the F35 classification in the 100 meters and the shot put previously. And he has since transitioned into cycling, where he is actually the British record holder for the C1 1 kilometer time trial. So we'll be digging into that as deep as we can. He also holds the record for the shot put. So for British athletes. So he's currently also preparing for his third Paralympic Games, which is in Tokyo, hopefully this year in 2021. My goodness, this is going to be one hell of a podcast episode for you. So please sit back, enjoy, and welcome to the show, Sam Ruddock. Sam, good afternoon. Welcome to the show.
Good afternoon, sir. It's a pleasure to be here in my bedroom.
I'm going to say it's a shame that we can't do any of these in person, but obviously circumstances dictate otherwise, don't they? So first off, I mean, I've read off in your intro a couple of things that you've got going on. Pretty, prestigious background and very, very good career so far. Excellent career so far, actually, should we say. What else have you got going on at the moment besides obviously being an athlete and preparing for the games? Because you're a very busy man, aren't you?
Well, I try my best to be. Thanks for the prestigious career shout out. This is going to be quite retrospective for me. But at the moment, my main source of income is working as a school sports officer for a primary school education charity that focuses primarily on PE and school sport. So our job is to enrich that program of PE and school sport. And the charity uses the sport premium that the government provides to all primary schools across the country. It's £10,000 in total. I think it's it's a huge number, but schools get this money across the board. And schools buy membership to our charity. So they're members for a number of years, and we provide PE and what's it called? Teaching cover and CPD and well-being peer-to-peer mentoring for the children. It's so diverse, all the work that we do. But that's 3 days a week. That's 9 to 5. That's 3 days a week. All of our work, of course, has moved like everyone else's online and virtual because schools are essentially closed apart from key workers and vulnerable children that are still in school. So a few of our coaches are still in schools working, but at the moment, for all intents and purposes, we're behind closed doors and we're delivering, as you and I are talking at this point in time, with the children, and that they're really, really enjoying it. The parents have been appreciative. I can't put into words how happy parents are to have other faces in their homes, because the children need that stimulus, not necessarily for home learning's sake, but for socializing sake. For them, it's a real boost to their day, and I think they're the groups of people, the young ones, and I'm talking up to the age of 16 and maybe even under 18. They're the ones that have been most affected by what's been happening because of the social aspect of being in school. People underestimate how much you learn as a young person through being in an environment around your peers. There's so much more than just what you learn and what you read and how you educate yourself. It's socializing they miss the most. So we're really, really happy that we're able to do that via a virtual format, and that's what makes the bread, as it were. So the other 2 days I train around those days too, but I then have 4 days for the rest of the week. So the two remaining days of the working week and the weekend to train, usually on a double day basis. And that works quite well with my timetable. And the charity are really, really understanding with regards to competition. training camps, etc. If I need time off, I can ask for leave, which is unpaid. Like they're not stupid. They're a charity, but they're also a business, so no one can take the mick. I have to take holiday or take unpaid leave, but they are really understanding with what I'm trying to achieve. And as you can imagine, the better I do in my competition, the better it makes their charity look. So it's a win-win situation as far as me as an employee and them as an employer. There's mutual benefit there, and we're really, really happy to have that relationship.
That's wicked. And you are also involved in a research project, am I right?
Yeah, it sounds like you've been doing your own research too, Leno. I've taken on way too much during lockdown in terms of like work, but this was through Loughborough University. So, and through word of mouth, which I'm sure a lot of listeners can probably attest to, is that the work that comes to you from someone else's recommendation is the strongest thing you'll ever get. Like, as opposed to applying for a job or hearing about a job, if someone asks, do you know someone who can do this for me, and they say your name, that's stronger than anything else. So the guys at Loughborough University London, they needed an athlete, someone that was in the field to help them work on a project that's going to use parasport to drive change and to drive away discrimination and stigma for people with disability, specifically in sub-Saharan Africa. The project is called Parasport Against Stigma. They needed an athlete that had knowledge of competing at that level and experience in coaching and mentoring with athletes. They asked someone that I know really well in the Paralympic in the field. He suggested my name, and they said, we want to give you this job. You actually fit the brief so well. Will you? And I said, yeah, of course, because it gives me a chance to work in these countries, Malawi, Zambia, Ghana I've been to before and previously. So, and it felt as if it was meant to be. And so I couldn't turn it down, and I couldn't say no. It is a casual contract. I'm not contracted to work for them on specific days. I do the hours when I can, so I fit that around my training. But the prospects in terms of networking, when the role is finished, it's a 4-year project. The prospects of networking, meeting new people, and broadening that perspective with an institution like Loughborough, which truly is global. I didn't really quite understand it until I graduated and saw how much impact it has across the world. Opportunity that was too good to pass up. Who doesn't want the name research associate attached to their name? Like it makes you sound real nerdy and intelligent, which I couldn't say no.
That's outstanding. So, have you got anything else going on? Do you have any time for anything else at all?
Dude, you know as well as I do, and I'm sure everyone else knows. If you're about that single life and you're not locked down for life, the dating scene's dead. So I don't need time for anything else. But on the odd evening, every now and then, you might catch me in the war zone. You'll never find me in the gulag, but you'll see me in the war zone every now and then. That's how I like to unwind. That's my thing. Music, gaming, and just catching up with people that I haven't seen in a while, and making sure that my friends and my family are okay, because everybody's dealing with this in a different way. So just checking in with people and making sure they're okay, because I'm really fortunate. In fact, I still have a job, meaning I can still have a roof over my head and I can still put food on the table. And it's as simple as that. And there are people that are not in that position that I'm in. So I feel responsible to just check in with them and see how they're doing, and offer them help if I can. That's where my time gets spent when it's not spent on me. It's a really, really selfish life to lead, being a performance athlete, but it's a choice that I've made, and I'm really conscious, as I'm sure other people will be. When you have that privilege, you have a responsibility to give back. The time that you take for yourself, you're responsible to give that back, either when you retire or when you're able to. So I really feel that's important. People understand their privilege and the position they're in, and do as best as they can to repay that. If you're spending all this time and effort on yourself, other people will do the same for you, and hopefully the circle just goes round and round.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just going back to a couple of those things that you were talking about there in terms of the research project, what kind of things are you hoping or expecting to see as a result of that project, and obviously affecting, so like South Africa and that region in Africa, and do you expect any sort of transition as to how it's going to affect sport in this country as well, and obviously across the world? Because I imagine there is quite a quite a stigma, and obviously a lot of barriers to participation for disabled athletes.
Yeah, well, it should go without saying that the pandemic has only exaggerated the divide between those that have and those that do not. So our work has almost doubled as a result. The initial goal from the outset of this project is to improve the access to assistive technology in those regions. So things like walking sticks, a pair of glasses, a wheelchair, things that help people in these really rural communities just be mobile and be independent. That is the end goal. But there's also aims around education, so increasing knowledge and understanding of people with impairments, improving opportunities for athletes to compete locally, regionally, nationally, and internationally, should they wish to. So developing the athlete pathway, developing the coaching pathway. Lots of these countries have Paralympic committees that were only established literally 10 years ago, which is no time at all. So we're working with the bare minimum of resources, and in terms of access to online technology and etc. It's practically barren. So we do have our work out for us, but we do have research to conduct with the feeling of the legacy of 2012 in mind, and how we've made changes and steps forward in this country in terms of perception of disability and attitudes towards it. But there's still a very, very long way to go. People always ask me, Sam, where's this legacy that everyone kept talking about? I said, it takes a long time. It's been there just about 10 years since we had the games. And only now are we starting to see the effects. We're starting to see parasport being talked about more often in the news, in the media. It's being marketed not only at the elite level, but also at the grassroots level, especially in school sport. You're having many opportunities for inclusive sport being provided, and integration between mainstream and SEND education, something that wasn't happening 5 years ago, even 10, 15 years ago. And seeing there was an influencer on Instagram who uses a wheelchair. She keeps herself in great shape. She works out. She's on the front of Cosmo this week. That's the first female wheelchair user to be on the front of Cosmopolitan. So there's a lot going on, but this isn't happening. These people that are in Ghana, Malawi, and Zambia, they are in the background, and they are an afterthought, because the stigma that surrounds it is that if you're impaired and there's something missing from you, you're practically worthless. So we want to change that using Paralympic sport as the vehicle, as the driver, and hopefully by broadcasting the games in more of these regions, whether it be via radio, television, etc., by showing the feats of Paralympians are doing what they do despite their impairments and despite their differences, we can hopefully influence that change more and say, look, these people aren't worthless. They have more to offer. They have more to give. Not necessarily by being athletic or being in sport, but they have value and they can contribute to society. That's the main aim of the project overall. So it's really exciting to be a part of it, and hopefully we get the change that we want to see. But as I'm sure you can imagine, with things being the way they are, the workload is almost tripled.
Imagine. I mean, it's amazing, isn't it? Like, just hearing some of the things that you're talking about there, it's amazing as to how much we kind of take for granted on a day-to-day basis. Just simply just being able to get glasses or a walking stick if you need it, and finding access to those things. Obviously, it's incredibly difficult to do. And bearing in mind that legacy from the 2012 games, have you yourself, I know you mentioned a few things there, but have you seen and felt a pretty big difference in terms of how people perceive disability sport?
Yeah, there's certainly been a very positive change in terms of attitude towards just generally in terms of perception, and how the average punter, shall we say, sees someone with a disability or with an impairment. Like if they're wearing a prosthetic, if they're wearing a blade, or if they're in a racing chair, and they see these things on television. You will look at someone else in the street that is using a wheelchair or using walking aids or whatever. Might look at them slightly differently and think, oh, well, actually, I might have misjudged you. I might have misjudged your capabilities. But where the water gets slightly murky is is the difference again between the haves and the have-nots. A lot of people don't understand and wouldn't, if you're not in the game, as it were, if you're not in the field, you wouldn't understand it. But what we get now in this social media world, where everybody has an opinion and has something to say, what we're getting now is the Paralympians, so people like me who compete at that level, and those that have not, and those that feel that they've been slighted or left behind because they're not Paralympic, and therefore using sport as a justification for one's existence happens a lot more in the Paralympics than it does in the Olympics. Like, I've come across teachers in SEND schools that will point to Johnny in the corner and say, "Oh, he's really keen on his running. He's going to be our next Paralympian." And I said, "Well, I've never been to a mainstream school and seen someone that's a pretty decent runner and say they're going to be our next Olympian, because it just doesn't work that way. Like, just because you run a decent leg in a sports day doesn't mean you're going to be the next Usain Bolt. Doesn't work out. So why would we look at someone with a disability and say that disability is then a golden ticket for you to then go and compete at Paralympics? And because you're going to a Paralympics, your life is therefore going to have meaning. So on the flip side of that, you get, well, if I'm not a Paralympian, then that therefore makes me worthless. So you're getting a lot of bite back from the average Joe with an impairment that will post online on Twitter saying, "Oh, I couldn't get off my train because there was no one here to assist me getting off my train because the door was closed and no one was waiting there with the ramp." He tweets about it and no one cares. David Weir, Werewolf, full-time Paralympic champion, he tweets about it. I guarantee there's clout. I guarantee there's tension. I guarantee there's media coverage, because he is who he is, and average Joe is who he is. So there's a very prickly relationship under the surface, between those that have and those that do not. So when we talk about legacy, there are positives that have come from it, absolutely, but there are also negatives. And where I'd wrap that up is why the negatives arise, because we still have a massive accessibility issue in this country, where we have infrastructure, buildings, facilities that, unless they're new builds and they were built 5 years ago, they are not accessible, and they are not welcoming, and they're not inviting to a wheelchair user or someone that needs mobility aids. And if you, as someone that wants to be active and recreational in the sport, as soon as you see the steps with no ramp, you're not interested. This place isn't for me. So that's something that needs to change. As great as the legacy has been for attitudes and perception, actual change that makes life more accessible for a disabled person that wants to be engaged and involved in sport, that has to change, like, a lot. But that's difficult because that's infrastructure, which costs money and it takes time. At the moment, time and money, if you're the government, your time and money is going to be put elsewhere because it's not the priority. I wish it were different, but the powers that be say otherwise. But that's not a debate we should get into right now.
I think maybe at some point I'd quite like to run as health and sports minister. We'll take care of a few things there. You can. I know you're quite busy, so I'll just call you for like backup and a bit of advice and assistance on that front. What do you say? I was just kind of thinking then, obviously, in terms of the way that kids are treated, and like what you said there, the teacher will kind of point to little Johnny in the corner and say, "Oh, he's going to be our next Paralympic star," kind of thing. Do you think that that's kind of like the fine balance between the teacher actually trying to give the child a bit of a leg up and a little bit of a confidence boost to get them involved, but then obviously, like you've mentioned there, it possibly kind of does the harm and the damage of, like, if you don't make that standard, you're essentially nobody, which is obviously just not true. So is it a fine balance of giving people the confidence to go forwards and try things and just be involved in sport? Because I know, from my position and obviously your position as well, we're both coaches. We know the power and the impacts that playing sport, being involved in teams, being able to get involved, and like you say, the barriers to entry. If there's no ramp there for someone in a wheelchair, well, you can't. You're not even in a position to succeed. Let alone, like, you can't even participate, let alone succeed. So where do you think that balance lies in terms of the way that we speak and treat people to get them involved and keep it that way?
That's a really, really good point that you make. And we para sport should be the reason why it's so popular is because it is a massive inspiration piece. It's something that provides a lot of inspiration and influence to those people that have misjudged what a person with an impairment could actually be capable of doing. And whether you've got an impairment or not, I don't see it as disability. I see it as just different abilities across the board. And you and I both know that for a lot of people, sport is the spark for them, and you know what you can learn and how you can develop yourself as a person through sport. So I would not chastise or maim any teacher that would want to hold that as a carrot to a student or a young person and say, look, this is capable, this is possible for you to achieve. If other avenues in their life perhaps they aren't having as much success in, who am I to get in the way of that? But again, on the flip side of it, you do have to consider, if that goal for whatever reason does not is unattainable or is not reached, well, you're then left in a situation where that young person is then actually going to start doubting their ability even more as well, because you told me this was going to be possible and it actually hasn't happened. So what have I got left to work on? So it is there is a very 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 fine line to tread. But I would say that even to young athletes that are on the pathway, as great as sport is and the opportunities it provides for you and the people that you can meet through participating and competing in it, it does not last forever, and your body has a finite amount of time for you to be able to use it at this level. So you will need something to reinvent yourself, because once you're on the podium, once you hold that cup, once you hold that trophy, once you achieve that PB, if that was what you're working towards and you finally achieve it and then you look at it and think, well, is that it? You will, because lots of athletes have been through that situation. They get to the pinnacle, it's like, well, this is what it feels like, what next? And there was nothing, and then there was nothing, and there's nothing next to them to move on to. Hopefully what this lockdown period has done is helped everybody, like whether you're in sport or not, is to help you understand. Because I know my younger brother himself went through a bit of an identity crisis because he's in theatre and theatre stopped, so he had nothing else to do, and he was wondering himself, well, what I was doing is gone, so what am I left with? So that was a shock to him. So hopefully, and I'm not saying this is easy for everyone else, but hopefully if what you've been doing has come to a halt, has come to a stop, and you've had to literally come to a shock yourself and think, what else have I got? What else makes me me? And you need to add more, and start adding more, start planning more, because you would hate to be in a situation where, whatever you were doing has gone and it's disappeared, and then all of a sudden you're looking at yourself thinking, well, what else do I have to offer? If you find yourself in that situation, then maybe now is a good time for you to start planning some more stuff for the future, because we're in that frame of mind now. We're in this world where everybody has more than one job. You're doing different things. You got more than one hat. You have to be versatile. You got to be multi-talented. You got to be doing this. You got to be doing that. Not putting yourself in all sorts of other direction, but you need a plan B and a plan C in this day and age. But even more so when it comes to sport, because the window is only open for such a time. And when it closes, you need to find yourself another door that you can walk into. And so I would always put that onto a young athlete, but especially a young athlete in the Paralympics, because Paralympians get into the game very young, like from the age of 14, they can be classified and sent to the highest level whilst they're still at school. So again, that as you say, the fine line between inspiration and knowing where your abilities and capabilities lie, and how valuable that is to you as a person. Yeah, it's a fine line. You're right. We've got to tread it carefully.
Yeah, well, I think like a lot of people now, they, mainly for the people who are on furlough, whether they're athletes or not, you've kind of got an opportunity now where your primary distractor in life, whatever it was, your job that you were doing, has been put on hold. So now you've just got this whole chunk of time where you have to contemplate, well, what am I doing with my life? What is it that I want to do? Like, you can actually live on your own terms with no obligation to go and work in an office or sit at a desk. And it's up to you to take your pick. And it was interesting that you were saying, kind of like as an athlete, you've got a very short career span, but then you need sort of plan B, C, and D as to like, well, what are my other options that are going to sit? And I've spoken about this in, I think it was a goal setting podcast that I did a few weeks back, where you will have your ultimate goal. Like, what's the big thing you want to feel, experience, and bring to the world, essentially? And number one, plan A, if you're an athlete, that's what it is. Your plan A is to inspire people, bring positivity, get people possibly involved in sport. And then once that career finishes, well, plan B, C, and D, you might just have a different avenue of doing it. So you're no longer competing, but you can still inspire, motivate, bring people in and include people and, get people excited about performing, can't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's part of the responsibility of having that choice, that freedom to use your body to achieve your goals. It's a very different way of working. It's still a job. There are days when any athlete will get up and say, I don't want to go into work today. But you can guarantee that people would kill to be in my position, would kill to be an athlete's position where, I mean, I'm not funded. I'm not paid by UK Sport to compete. As I said, my main source of income is an actual job. I work practically full time and still train. But then again, if the roles were reversed and you said, so, well, try doing what I do in a training session and then see how much you would enjoy it. It's because we're not just like when people talk about athletes and you watch Premier League football and you see a player like miss an open shot or you don't see their lack of effort. I don't think people quite understand. I'll never sit there and criticize an athlete that makes a mistake, whether it be football, rugby, cricket. If I see it on television and I ask, like, where's your heart? Like, where's your passion? Where's your drive? It's like, if you understood the work that goes into being a performance athlete day in and day out, and you saw what happens when the lights are off, you would think differently. You would not come to that conclusion. So yeah, we have to treat it like a job. And the moment you start treating it as if it's always going to be there forever is when you start to become complacent, and that's when it becomes dangerous. And that's when someone else that treats it like a job and is hungrier for it is going to start taking your place. So you've got to be careful.
Careful. I mean, I'm sure we will definitely get more into the training and the mentality around that because later on as we carry on talking, because I know I've definitely had, like, being a trainer and a coach and doing what I do, I definitely get faced with a lot of questions around, well, I just want to be motivated like you are all the time, and like, you always want to work out, you always want to train, and I'm like, no, don't. Absolutely not. Like, there are days like you've mentioned and alluded to, there are days that you wake up and you think, oh God, like, I imagine for you, maybe it's a case if you've got to get down to the track and, well, these days hop on a bike and, absolutely smash your legs to the point it feels like they're going to blow off. And it's, training isn't a pleasant thing. Like, it's controlled suffering, I think. Would that be a fair way to describe it?
Yeah, it is controlled. It's controlled, sometimes uncontrolled, sometimes with me and my my impairment, my cerebral palsy. There's a lack of control there sometimes, but yes, it's calculated discomfort. That's what I would call it.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to sum it up. So now, obviously, one of the things that you kind of alluded to earlier when you were talking about your role in terms of going into schools, and obviously at the minute, a lot of kids are at home. Some school key worker kids are actually in school. How much do you think is being lost or disrupted a little bit in terms of, either kids' development or involvement in sport as a lack of, being able to mix, being able to train, being able to compete, being able to play, and just be a kid?
I was speaking to a colleague of mine who works specifically with the key stage 1 age group, so children under the age of 7, let's say, for one of the phrase, and working with them again after the first lockdown. So from March through to summer, and then beyond that, she saw some of them again before we went into this second lockdown or third lockdown. I don't know which one we're at now, but she said a lot of them had lost a lot of their core strength, so they were unable to perform basic fundamental movements. So in terms of ability, agility, balance, and coordination, like the ABC, the fundamentals of movement, the fundamentals of traveling as a human being, before we even get to the point where traveling for a purpose, whether it be sports specific, a lot of these skills and key things they needed to perform their daily task, they deteriorated as human beings, because they weren't in school, because they weren't running around, they weren't being active, they weren't in PE. So I think that's the key hole that we're going to be facing over the next couple of months, is that unless these children are actively inclined, unless they would call themselves sports people, and they're at a club, a satellite club or a club externally to the PE they do in school. Now, from my perspective, I probably went to basketball club after school once a week, and the only sport that I did was the PE that was set for me in school. So I think that's the biggest challenge now, is getting these children, these young people, back into an environment where they can be physically active. If they're not doing it outside. I mean, and even on Loughborough campus, like yesterday afternoon, before I went to training to Power Base, the rugby pitch, the rugby field, a couple of kids on there kicking a ball around. So the appetite is there. Like they do want to be out, and they do want to be with their friends. But what school provides that opportunity for that to happen more often and more regularly. And we can talk about the lack of skills that are being developed physically, where we can't lose sight of the fact that the vital skills in terms of socializing, understanding the benefits of respecting your opponent, listening to authority, whether it's an official, whether it's a referee, working as part of a team, persevering when the scoreline isn't going your way, learning how to be resilient, how to be coachable. When to talk, when to shut up, when to listen. These kinds of things that you learn through sport, you can't. That is also a danger of being lost. So the hill is getting steeper the deeper we go into this lockdown. So that's the key that I think is all to this, with children that are at home. But we can't just think about the children. We also have to think about the parents, especially the single parents that are trying to hold down a job and homeschool and look after the kids and look after themselves as well. Like, consider their physical health, their mental health. Like, it's tough. It's really, really tough times because daycare and wraparound care can't operate at the moment. So again, it's a really tough situation for everybody to be in. Because school is great for children, but it's great for parents too, because they get to go to work, they get to work on themselves. You all have children for a reason. Like, you have children because you love your kids, you love to be around them. But you were a person that had a life before they came along. So you want to keep working on that, and them being out of the house gives you a chance to work on that. So it's, again, with that all happening, it's something that we have to consider. It's not just the young people that are suffering, it's the parents and the guardians too, that they're keen to work on themselves, but seeing their kids not getting the interaction they need it's a difficult time for them. But hopefully there's light at the end of the tunnel. With Easter, I think Easter's the earliest they're talking about having schools reopening again fully. So it sounds like a long time to wait, but it's not. It'll be here before you know it.
Yeah. So if you're busy now, or if you think you're busy now, just wait for all that to kick off and wait for you to get back into schools and get back to coaching and teaching again.
Mad.
So, well, I think we've probably spent about half an hour first, and we've not even really began on your own personal career in sport, which we're going to dig into now, if you're okay with that. So, as an athlete with cerebral palsy, and obviously it's something that affects everything that you've mentioned there in terms of the basics of being able to travel, agility, balance, coordination, all those kind of things. how did that impact you kind of getting into sport and starting and developing in the first place?
Well, my cerebral palsy was congenital, so I've had it since birth, and went through all the physio, child development in the NHS, shin splints, special shoes, no walking aids. Though a walking aid, like though a walking frame was given to my mum when I was little, and she put it in the loft and said he doesn't need that. He'll be fine. He'll be fine. He'll get on with it, and I'll make sure he gets on with it. I would say that my mother was a pushy parent,
Was
but
it,
she was.
sorry to just break you off there. And what was your reaction to that? Just going into the loft and her saying,
I was too young to know that. I don't think I even saw it. When I think I was under the age of 10, so I don't think I really had much of a say in what I did or didn't do with regards to my mobility and my actual traveling. But fortunately, she had that attitude. There are lots of parents that have any child with an impairment or a disability that are so keen to wrap them up in cotton wool and be the helicopter parent and make sure that they're safe all the time and they're actually looked after it and they're cared for. But my mum didn't want that to happen. She was very keen on me finding my own way, and that old cliche, like if you learn to fall down, you'll learn to pick yourself back up again. So she was really keen on making sure that I understood that and I was able to have my own independence. And I think that's probably the key driver for everything that I have accomplished with my body, is that I was given this opportunity to be independent, to not be in a wheelchair by the time I was 20 something, which is what the doctor said would happen to me when I was born. I'd be a hopeless case and I wouldn't be independent. So everything that I'm doing, I'm kind of paying it forward, in that sense. So when I was at school, I just got engaged and got involved in PE and learn about what my body was capable of through doing that, and obviously playing football, which is obviously the main. Everyone plays football at school. I couldn't kick and run at the same time because multitasking, and the way cerebral palsy affects me, it affects my brain and the neurological signals from my brain to the affected muscle. The affected muscles being my legs and my core. So doing two things at once, coordinating, kicking and running, impossible. Being in goal was much easier because all my legs had to do was move from side to side, jump, etc., and my hands did all the hard work. So that's where I found the most joy. That's where I ended up the most. That's where my friends put me. I was always the last to be picked because I wasn't very quick and I was very slow and I fell over a lot, so I often ended up in goal. So I had to be a decent goalkeeper. And I found basketball, sport that I loved, the first sport that I really, really enjoyed, because again, all I did was run, pivot, hop, step, euro step, and then all the dribbling and the shooting with my hands. So that allowed my legs to focus on just one thing. And then that obviously progressed to a more robust program of sport when I got to my A levels after GCSEs. I tried literally everything: tennis, cricket, rugby. It was really pushed that you should be academic, but you should also be involved in sport, and that the two would go hand in hand. A healthy body breeds a healthy mind, and that was something that was really pushed when I was studying my A levels. And then that exploded when I got to Loughborough and found American football, a sport that I got into because I played it a lot on my Xbox. Like I played a lot of Madden, and I initially tried out for the basketball team at Loughborough, but I got through the first day of trials, but couldn't compete with everyone else because they didn't have cerebral palsy, but I did. So it made things quite difficult. But the great thing about football for the Loughborough Aces, Loughborough Students American football, was that there were no trials, there were no tryouts. If you tried the sport, you liked it, you could stay. If you didn't like it, you could go. And I was really keen to get involved and show what I could do. And fortunately, I had coaches that were also really open-minded and said, "Look, we want to play the game. Yes, you walk funny. Yes, there's issues there. Why do you walk with a limp, Sam? I've got cerebral palsy." That didn't concern them. What they were more concerned about and happy to have was someone that was willing to play the game. And they were willing to teach me how to play the game. So that was what it came down to. So my journey through sport has been because of education. Like I wanted to get decent grades, decent GCSE, decent A levels, and sport was the way for me to unwind it and relax from that pressures of being an athlete. So I became a student athlete almost by accident. And then obviously going up to the Paralympics, that was an accident that happened through football. So that was a talent ID process that happened in December 2011. So it was the season where we were making a push for the playoffs, and we were practically in the way to the playoffs. So we were waiting to see who we'd get in the playoffs as Loughborough students. And I was training for the combine sessions that we did quarterly every year. And there was a coach there, a sprint coach there from the local athletics club, and he approached me and watched me do my 40s and said, look, you enjoy your sport, you've got a bit of speed, how do you feel about competing in disability sport? And that was the first time anyone ever said that I could specialize against other people with cerebral palsy that were just like me. And the rest is history. That was in December 2011, and then 8 months later, after football, after the season had finished, we got beaten by Hearts in the semi-final, absolutely crushing. And then got to the Paralympics in August, like an 8-month turnaround, and graduated in the same year. So it was absolutely wild turnaround. Like the transition was ridiculous. But what I had from the guys on the team was like this unyielding support for me to go and chase it, because that we'd been through so much in that 3 years that I played, being not just being a better football player, but being a better person in terms of understanding how the game works, and with it being the ultimate team sport, and the things you can learn through being a part of a team that rides for each other. It's like one big family, and I'm pretty sure Jason Scott would be the first to say, because he was head coach of Loughborough students when I was playing. So he'd be the first to say that the team is first and foremost a family. And when you go to war on the field for those 4 quarters, you got to ride for each other. So that translates not just from football, but also into your life as well. Like, are you willing to commit? Are you willing to have the right attitude? Are you willing to put in the right effort, not just for your team, but for yourselves? Like, you've got to finish your studies, because if you don't finish your studies and do well in your exams, you can't come back and play football. So the two went together hand in hand. So all in all, that was the ethos that kept me coming back to the field, and also kept my mind right when it came to studying. So I owe a lot of what's happened to me through the Paralympic Games. I owe a lot to the lessons that I learned in those 3 years of playing football, which I'm sure you can attest to as well.
I mean, there's so many things involved there in terms of unpicking all of that. I think, like you mentioned, in terms of football, and it is, Jason himself does a very, very good job of making the team a family atmosphere, and everyone cares about each other, everyone fights for each other. And well, on the football field, you have to, don't you? There's just no escaping that, because if you don't fill your hole or you don't penetrate your gap, like, obviously, because you were a linebacker as well. So, like, just to kind of, for people that don't know American football, if you're going in to play the sport, there are positions for all shapes, sizes, abilities, people that can catch, people that can't catch. If you can't catch, you're on defense. If you can, you're a receiver or something like that. That's normally how it works. And then if you can't do any of those things, you go and play quarterback. So that's going to be very harsh if there's any QBs listening to this. So I do apologize. But to play the position that you played on defense as linebacker, you have to be a little bit unhinged, don't you? There's got to be something going on there. What drew you into, are you a particularly violent person, or?
I don't know if I'd say I was particularly violent, but I liked the idea of stopping the ball. Like, I like the idea of standing, of stopping the flood, being the dam. Like that idea of rushing to a ball carrier and making sure that the defense stands strong. That appealed more to me than carrying the ball. I didn't find that I had the skill set to be of value when I was carrying the ball. I felt like I had more to offer in terms of being the stopper. To put it in really, 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 really simple terms. And you do have to want to invite contact as a defensive player. Like, you have to be willing to initiate that contact, because and it is quite sadistic when you talk about it in that terms, but you have to be willing to impose your will on another man. and you have to. And whenever I talk to the guys in the huddle, because now I'm also a coach for the Loughborough students team now. It's taken a while for me to get to that point, but I thought I'm on campus so often, and I miss the game, so I want to be able to impart knowledge, the things that I've learned. So I coach edge rushing. Yeah, so the defensive ends and the outside linebackers and penetrating, blitzing and rushing the edge and turning the corner to get to the quarterback and running back in the backfield. I'm always telling them, look, this is one of the only sports in the world where you will get to literally destroy somebody and not get arrested for it. There are things you can do on this field. Like, you won't catch a case. No cases will be catched for what you do in the 60 minutes you're on this field. You can do whatever you want within the laws of the game. You can impose your will on a man and not get sent to jail for it. So take advantage of that. And it takes a certain mind to buy into that. But once you do, it is a lot of fun, because when it's all said and done and the whistle's over it and you're walking down the line, you're shaking hands, like, there's a lot of respect there. Like, we're always told that as a family, we're all wearing the same color jersey. Anyone not wearing the same color is going to get got. They're going to get it. And you have to have that attitude. But when the whistle gets blown and the game is over, there's a lot of respect between players, because it takes a mindset to be in that mindset where you're almost willing to hurt somebody to win a game. But when it's all said and done, you share that brotherhood between teams. Like, we play this game because we love it. We're not out here to really hurt each other. But when it's all said and done, we can all shake hands and dap it up and say that was a great game. But for people that don't understand how the game works, it's almost like chess pieces. Essentially, what you said with regard to playing linebacker, or whether it's a safety or a defense position. If someone doesn't do their job, the play doesn't work. If someone doesn't fill their gap, if someone doesn't stick to their assignment, if someone doesn't cover their man, the plan for that play literally falls apart. So so to me, it's the ultimate team sport. People say rugby is very, very close to it, and I agree in a sense that I've played both. I played union, I played league, I played football. But the way that football players work, if someone doesn't do their job, the defense does not succeed. So everybody is relying on everybody else to do their job. You have one job, and everybody has to be on the same page, which is what made it so attractive to me as a sport in general. And again, it's something brand new. It's still a very niche sport in this country. It's probably experiencing the same burst of popularity that basketball was in the 90s, of Space Jam, of Michael Jordan, and that explosion in popularity in basketball. We're getting the same now with the international series coming in 2007 at Wembley, and they're now being 3 games a year, 3 regular season games, not just exhibition games, but regular season games, something that we never would have thought would have happened after the breakdown of NFL Europe, and with it being an NFL academy now in London, and players in this country being put onto the international development pathway in the NFL. We've got 2 guys. We've got a guy at defensive end called Deo. He plays for Loughborough students, and we've got Ao at Nottingham Uni. He plays linebacker. These 2 were on a development pathway to play in the league, to try and get to the combine, like for next season, which is huge. I mean, and we do have British players that are playing at that level, that are playing in the league. But the game has grown so much since you and I stopped playing. So I'm jealous. I'm jealous. But at the same time, I'm really proud of being part of that legacy and building it for the future, and passing on to the young generation, telling them, look, this is a great game. You can learn so much from playing this game if you just give it a shot.
You don't play for the benefit of your health, though, do you? It's not a sport that you take up to be fit and healthy, is it? It's because it's a strange thing. Like you mentioned there about the mentality of, probably even more so on defense, where you are going out there with the mentality and the attitude of you're going to go and get someone. Like anyone and everyone, every single play, you are going to hit someone. There is going to be contact, and someone's going to come off worse than someone else. Like every single play is non-negotiable. It's what happens. But then, on the flip side of that, to be able to go and do that and impose your will on someone else, you've also got to be accepting that someone's going to come and do the same to you at some point in time on the field. Like someone's looking for you. So, I mean, did you have any of those moments where, I've definitely had it. Training, games, I've definitely had it where I've been in the middle of a play and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you've been completely cleaned out. Have you had a situation like that where you've just been completely obliterated and just thought, fair play?
Yes, I do. I do remember it quite vividly. I think it was an end around that was the play that we were working against. And the ball was coming round to the weak side, so the side that I'm responsible for containing. So I'm pursuing it, and I don't keep my head on a swivel. I'm not meerkatting, which is something we always tell our players, like, you have to just look from left to right, because people, to put it in perspective, when you've got a helmet on, your field of vision is so restricted. It's almost like wearing a pair of binoculars all the time. Your field of vision is so impaired that you have to look from left to right. I didn't do that on this play. So what happened is that I got cut blocked. So people that don't understand it is that offensive players, when they're not carrying the ball, their job is to protect their ball carrier, and by doing that, and they can actively take you out of a play, so they can contact you when you with or without the ball. They can take you out of the play by any means necessary. So over that by the leg, it has to be done legally, but they can block you to basically create a path for their offensive ball carrier to run through, so you don't touch them. And this was done in the extreme to me, and the big offensive lineman, threw himself into my kneecap with his helmet, led with his helmet, which is perfectly within his rights to do. And that was hard. That was pain. Like, I was down. I was literally yelling, like, because it was so, like, my knee had literally buckled. And then got carried off the field. And I remember Coach Davis turning around to the defense, the backers, and saying, because we had a pretty, I would say, scary defense. When our defense was playing, like, it was scary. He turned around to them and said, "Boys, next play, we're sending the house. We're sending all of you, and I want you to put the pain on this quarterback. We put the pain on this line for doing that to one of our boys." So they did get their retribution in the end. But yeah, until you have been clocked, as you described, you never really fully appreciate what it means to be on a football field. But again, what happens on practice very much will dictate what happens in a game. So in practice, like, we faced probably some of the best linemen and running backs in terms of our drills, like in that key contact area where you want to impose your will, you want to fight for those yards and make sure that you squeeze the running lanes down and get to the ball carrier. And when you've got someone like Adam Hope, who people won't know, but Adam Hope was one of the best players that we've ever had at uni ball and in the Premiership as well. Like, just absolute freak of nature. And when he had a good lineman in front of him, he was practically unstoppable. We had to face that as a defensive player, as a linebacker. I had to face that every week. I had to initiate that contact with these linemen that were huge and try and get to Adam Hope at the same time. So when you're facing that kind of standard, you're always ready to face whatever comes in the game, and that translates into anybody's training. Like, if you're willing to put yourself through the hardest times in your training, the game will feel like a breeze. Like you bleed in training, so it doesn't have to field. So the more you put yourself through it in training, the easier it's going to be when it comes to game time. It's going to feel like it's nothing because you've already done the hard work in training. So that's a key lesson that I learned from football, is that you can put yourself through it in practice. So when it comes to game time, it's not a shock to the body. It doesn't come as a shock. It's something that I've dealt with worse than this in training. So this is going to be easy when it comes to game time. So yeah, that's something that I've learned from football, and I still carry with me to this day.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that a key mentality that kind of still serves you now, as you, like, every day you go into training, that, you know, you have that kind of thought process where it's like, right, what am I here to do? What am I going to gain from it? And, you know, how is this going to help me? Because one of the things that I often speak about when people are working towards a goal is the goal is so far in the future. I mean, for you, obviously preparing for an Olympics, it's 4 years from one to another, or 5 in this case. Yeah, you might have a few championships in between then, but like, if your big, target is like, I want to perform on the elite level on the biggest stage, your excitement for that is so far away, but you realize you have to do the basics of performing day in, day out, every single session. You've got to kind of leave it all and give it all there. Is that what the mentality is like day in, day out for you?
Yeah, it is. It's very much a question of process. You have to enjoy the process of getting to the small short-term goals that eventually lead to the long term. And that's not just training, that's everything that prepares you for training, where getting sleep, getting the right nutrition, staying hydrated, and as I mentioned already, there'll be days where you won't want to go through those steps, but it is the days where it's those days where you don't want to do it that make the difference, because there'll be the people that will give up and won't do what's necessary, and those that do are very often the ones that will see the gains come their way towards the end of a training block or towards the end of a session. It's those people that say, do you know what, I'm actually going to get up this morning and I'm going to do this session. Yes, it might not be to the little quality that I want it to be at, but at least I'll have done it, and that's money in the bank. Like if you're not feeling 100% on a particular day, it's stupid for you to assume that you're going to have a session that's going to be 100% the same quality that you would have had if you'd have been as fresh as a daisy, raring to go, great nutrition, great sleep, great hydration. And if that hasn't happened, it's stupid of you to assume that is going to happen if you're feeling at like 70% or 60%. Because I've been caught up in that mentality where I used to beat myself up after training when I hadn't performed as well as I had, and I hadn't considered my preparation up to that point. So that being said, it's really, really naive that you can give 100%, like you can go balls to wall every single day, because the body's not built that way. Training programs aren't built that way. There's recovery in there. There's tempo efforts. There's submaximal efforts. There's drills. There's foundations. There's fundamental work. There's core. There's flexibility, mobility. You can't smash. You can't destroy yourself every single day. But when the opportunity comes for you to work on the little bits and pieces, the little bits and pieces are there. So when it comes to those max effort sessions, those grueling sessions that really test you, you're able to complete them to a higher standard because you've done all the little bits that make up for it. But it's very much a question of sticking to the process. And with regards to what you said previously, like what you're telling your athletes and people that you work with, you have to understand that the goal is long term, but the key driver as to why a goal is important to you is to remind yourself of the reason why you're doing it in the first place. Yeah. Why am I doing this? It's the little, really, really, really small things. Why am I doing this power clean? Why am I doing this plyometric? Why? If for one moment you forget the reason why you're doing it, then the process is going to start becoming lost, and then it's going to start becoming worthless. And very often the reason why people aren't motivated, and we've spoken about it already, about how we can't be motivated every day. Like, how are you so motivated? How are you so inspired? Where do you get all this energy from? It's like, if you honestly believe that I'm like this 100% 24/7, you're absolutely crazy. But the underlying theme that runs through all of it is that I'm always conscious of the reason why something is happening, why something has been programmed, why it's happening in this way. Well, it's for this reason. It's so you can accomplish this, it's so you can achieve it, so you can complete this movement better, you can sustain this effort for longer. All put together, when it comes to time to compete and perform, you're in the best shape that you can be to achieve what you set out to achieve, which is why the process was written as it was in the first place. So yeah, that is something again that I've learned from football, that it's process driven, and the chinks in the armor will become apparent if you find an athlete that unfortunately has not stuck to the process, and has thought that they can do the bare minimum, because it's again, old cliche. If you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got. And those athletes or those people, like in any walk of life, whether it's sport or business, like if you do the bare minimum, you'll get the bare minimum. And it's as simple as that. But if you do more when you can, the more you invest, the more you'll be able to withdraw. And it's as simple as that.
Do you think, obviously, going into that mentality of, why am I doing this drill? Why am I doing this clean? Why am I doing this sprint? Why am I doing this 30-second interval? Why am I doing this foam rolling or mobility session? Like, do you think that it gets easier to answer those questions, or even ask yourself the question in the first place, if you have that kind of combination and the background of being not just the athlete, but also as a coach or an athlete mentor as well. So you kind of combine the two roles and you can become more conscious about what it is you're doing session by session. Do you think that that's an important factor in it, or is that just something that you've naturally had?
Well, I think it's something that I have learned to do, to not skip over the fundamentals, like the important things that have to happen before you can get into a session, or the important things that have to happen before you try and attempt a certain move. Like there's building blocks and there's a process that has to be followed, and I had to learn that the hard way. Being in a sport like athletics, where fundamental movement is paramount, like your mobility, your ability to hold your stride length, like the very simple body weight control is the number one factor in track and field and athletics. Like it is the foundation for everything that we do, whether it's throwing shot put, whether it's sprinting, whether it's discus, whether it's javelin, whether it's pole vault. You will find athletes. You will not find athletes better conditioned in terms of movement and mobility than track and field. So that's really helped me pass that knowledge on to other athletes. So our linebackers, for example, like I did some really simple athletics drills with them, drills that I thought were simple, but drills I realized are actually quite complicated. So what I asked them to do was to hold a stick above their head, which essentially what they did is it isolated their upper body. It meant they couldn't move their arms in their movement when they were traveling. I asked them to move, to essentially go into a jog whilst they were holding this stick in the air. And they were all over the place. It told me that a lot of what they were doing, a lot of the driving force behind their mechanics was driven by the upper body, first and foremost. And I said, if you want to make your cadence, the difference between your back foot and your front foot, if you want to make your movement with your legs fundamentally more efficient and stronger, you have to learn to use those legs and have your upper body and your arms and your shoulders be the afterthought. They have to facilitate the movement. They can't be the key driver for the movement. So these are things that I'm able to pass on and things that I've learned about myself. So when we talk about 40 times, and we talk about going from 5 yards depth and covering a short distance as quickly as possible, because that's what football is essentially. Football is essentially how fast, how efficiently can you close the gap between one point and another gap, because it's a game of yards, and it happens so quickly. You blink and you miss it. So when we talk about efficiency of movement and how I can get an athlete to go from one point to the other with using as less energy as possible, that's something that I don't think, especially the guys that were in our team. And if you're not being taught, I understand it. But extra movement costs energy, and that energy is taken away from you, and therefore it's going to be zapping like quarter after quarter, minute after minute, that you're going to have less energy to play the game. So I want you to be able to get from this point to this point using as less energy as possible and being as efficient as possible. So when I explain to them, switch your arms off and use your legs, it means that you're getting to this mark quicker. You've used less energy, which means you have more energy to put into the contact area, to put into the tackle. And all it is a fundamental understanding of your body, and how it moves. But this requires, going back to my original point, this requires preparation. This requires, whether it be foam rolling or mobility or stretching. And the more they do this, the more their body is going to be prepared for the session. And from my personal perspective, it's very much a question of prehabilitation and rehabilitation. It prevents injury. If I don't do all the stretching and mobility before my session, I'm at greater risk of being injured. And if I'm injured, I can't train. If I can't train, I can't compete. And so it all comes back to the process, why we're doing it. Yes, I want to be more flexible. Yes, I want a greater range of motion. But the be all and end all of it is, the more flexible and the more soft my body is, and the more conditioned my muscles are in terms of those really small key movements, whether it's like a hamstring stretch or a lunge or anything like that, it's going to make the body less susceptible to a niggle or an injury. And I want these guys, I want our guys to understand that. Like, I want them to have longevity. I don't want them to sit a game out because they didn't do the small things. Oh, you know, I tweaked a hamstring, or I did this, or I did that. It's like, well, did you warm up properly? Did you do your stretching, do mobility? If the answer is no, then we know the reason why. So it comes back to accountability. Who is accountable for it? But an athlete can't be accountable if we don't explain to them in the initial stages. You have to do this so this can happen. You know, it provides a platform. The fundamental platform is there for them, and the only thing that we ask is that if they adhere to what we've asked them to do, they can be great players. But it's now down to you to initiate that process. And and again, it's obvious, like, because if a player doesn't do what we asked them to do, then the team suffers as a result, because we've got players that aren't at a standard we expect them to be at. So a player has to step up to the mark, and as players achieve their goals in terms of movement and ability, then the team gets better. So it's on us as coaches to instill that attitude within them, that you do the little things right, then the big things will become more apparent. You become a better player, we become a better team, we win more games, we get a championship, which is hopefully what we should have focused on this year. With Bucks being cancelled now, obviously for obvious reasons, it's very hard to motivate our finalists to stay in the game. But we want to keep them sharp, so we are working with them like offline to make sure that they stay motivated, and football will come back, as everything will come back eventually. It just takes time, as you know.
I was going to say, because I think especially like living that student athlete lifestyle, that having that sport as part of it, I know for myself that was a massive kind of switch off, relax, run around, hit something. You know, it's a massive de-stressor in a way, and a good little distractor to pull you away from kind of the boredom of sitting in your room and doing your research and all your reading. You need a break from it. I was just enjoying the overhead stick running drills as well, because I think one of the things that a lot of coaches overlook, and I know I see it pretty much every time, either work with a junior football team, or you see coaches or whoever it is preparing drills for athletes, and you've got millions of cones, millions of hurdles all over the fucking place, and it's all very exciting. There's about 1,000,001 changes of direction, whereas teaching that basic posture, positioning, I know for the overhead running drill, like that foot strike placement and anterior or pelvic tilt control, and having the ability to control those things will then allow you to go and do everything else that you want to do. Like, doing those basic things will get you in a position where you are so efficient and so quick and accurate with your foot striking that you're not wasting any energy, and you automatically become quicker by default, don't you? Just through doing those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've tried to help the guys understand, and coaches as well, and our other coaching staff, and they said, who's going to be responsible for strength and conditioning and SAQ, like speed, agility, and quickness, and fundamental sprint training is such a big part of what we do across the entire team. And because I have that knowledge from the coaches that I've worked with and what I've experienced at the Paralympic level, I mean, the guys will buy into what I say because they've seen it, like they know what I've done and they've seen what I've done, so they buy into it. So when I say, if I can get you to move at this pace, if I get you to move at a walking pace, at tempo, with a better quality and with a better efficiency, when we get you to going at top speed, you're going to be able to sustain it for longer. And on the flip side, if we go for negative, if you can't hold your stride at 50% tempo, how am I going to get you to be able to hold it when you're moving at 100%? The quality is going to be so poor, and I wouldn't want to put you in that position. So the reason why we're stripping it down. And I even said, I'll give you an example. There's a guy called Jake who plays defensive end. He's had a really serious ankle Achilles rupture in the past, which means that his running style is severely affected, meaning that he doesn't use certain parts of his body to compensate for the fact that he's had that Achilles injury, because he can't put force down through the ground in a certain way. And I said to him, look, the more of these small drills that you do, these small walking drills that help re-engage and reawaken the part of your body that's been dormant because of that Achilles injury, I'm telling you now, you'll be able to be in a position where you can move as efficiently as everybody else on this line. And we did those drills for about 10 minutes. Took him back to because we were practicing like our first 5 yards. We were practicing the first get off, the first 5 yards, the first initial burst of speed for a defensive end is so crucial in the work that we do. And I said, focus now on making these first 2 stride lengths as rangy as possible. And what we've done is we've warmed up. We've primed the muscles that you have been afraid to use. We prime them now. They know that it's time to go. So I guarantee you that when you put your foot into the ground, your movement quality will change drastically, even after 10 minutes. And because we did that, Jake bought into it, and now he's doing it more often because he couldn't believe how quickly he was moving based off 10 minutes of work that he didn't know about and that he'd neglected for years because he was afraid to do it. So it's that light bulb moment is what we live for as coaches. If we can show an athlete, look, if you do this, you will improve. And when you see it happening, and when it happens to them, you're like, yes, come on, let's go. It's not even winning of a game or getting a sack or intercepting a ball. It's actually the fact that I've allowed, we have worked together to allow this athlete to do something that they believed wasn't possible. And that's literally that's why we're in the game. That's what gets me excited about when I go to coaching. I can help an athlete achieve something that they thought that wasn't possible. But it doesn't happen unless you show them. You have to. There's so many coaches that will just write a program and give it to an athlete and say, look, go and take this. You're right to do with it. But I will never ask my athletes to do something that I physically myself can't do. Look, I put myself on the field and I say, I'd like to do it like this. I'd like to do it this way. If you can't do it this way, try it this way. I give them options, I give them alternatives. But like the best leaders, whether it be coaches or mentors or whatever, we were the ones that will lead, as I'm sure you know. And it's, again, the cliche: you've got to lead by example. You can't just tell. You've got to show and tell, and get an athlete to buy into it. And once they buy in, they'll start doing it for themselves. They'll start holding themselves accountable. And the best part about it is when they start doing it, other athletes start doing it too. And then they start holding themselves accountable, because pressure from your peers and your teammates is so much bigger than the pressure coming from top down from a coach. You can see it in one athlete, and then that attitude starts to spread. And that's when the ethos really starts to take hold. And that's when athletes and teammates start chewing each other out. Why have you done the work that's been set? Because it now makes you, because you are now suffering. You're not at the standard that we want you to be at, and now we're all going to suffer. But that comes from them. It doesn't come from me. It has to start with the coach, but it ends with the athletes. And if you can pass that on, then you're on the right road to having a team that's going to work and ride for each other. And even if it's not in a team environment, if it's just an individual, like as an individual, you can give an athlete, once you've given them the program and you've told them that ethos and what you expected them, they then become self-autonomous, which then makes them more coachable. And that's what you want. You want an athlete that you give them a program and say, I know you're going to do this because I've told you how to do it and I've explained how you're going to do it. And if you can get an individual to basically police themselves, you're not always on their case, it makes your job a whole lot easier. But again, it takes the laying of the foundation first and get them to buy in. Why I'm asking you to do this. If you do this, you'll become a better athlete. And when that happens, it's easy.
Yeah, I think that's a key sign to a winning team as well, isn't it? When you've got the dressing room or the changing room where, when guys are actually picking each other out, pulling each other up, dragging each other forward, pushing each other on. We have kind of the mentality, or there's the saying of steel sharpens steel. The sharper you can be in here and around each other, holding each other to account, whether it's speaking to each other one-to-one, making sure you're doing the work away from our training, or making sure that when we go up against each other in training, you're giving me your very best, because that's going to help me improve as well. I think that is 100%. If you want to be a winning team or run a winning program or have a winning season, that's the kind of mentality and attitude you've got to have instilled in everybody in there, or at the very least, if you can't get it in everybody, get it in your key players, get it in your key leaders.
And it's not even having a winning season. If you want a team that's going to grow and progress to a point where they have a better performance in comparison to the last game or the last outing, if you want that ethos of progress, that's what it is. It's the ethos of progress. If you want it, instill that ethos, you have to pass it on first. It has to come from you, and you have to show it. You have to lead by example.
Yeah, no, that's a very, very good point. What we mentioned, obviously, like your training cycle, a full 4-year cycle. You'll break that down into other smaller chunks with other championships involved. What are some of the small terms or the shorter term goals that you have at the moment, or you focus on to, go through that barrier of, I'm going to get up early, I'm going to go in, I'm going to train, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do my recovery work. What are the small term goals that you've got at the moment that you would, or even the goals that you would normally focus on that are just ahead of you, so you can keep going and you feel motivated to carry on?
Well, looking back on what's happened in 2020 in hindsight, having no competitions, having that extrinsic motivation made training very difficult. There'll be times where I didn't get up in the morning and I just stayed in bed because, well, what have I got to train for? Like, the reason I train is so I can compete. I love it because competing gives me a chance to show myself and prove to myself that I have improved. I love to set the PB. Like, I could quite happily go to a games, achieve a personal best, and not win a medal, because as far as I'm concerned, I've done better than I had previously. And nobody really really cares anyway whether you won a medal or not. Like, as far as performance directors are concerned, they can take an athlete to an international event and they can perform better than they ever have before, then they've shown that through their programming and through their training that they've improved. And the proof is there in the time. The time doesn't lie. It's there and it's set in stone. And yes, the medal is a bonus to me. The medal is a bonus. The podium is a bonus to me. I would and even if I win a gold and I don't PB, like, it's a gold medal, and my coach was going to say, like, no one cares about the time you set. The fact of the matter is you won the medal. But in myself, I'd be slightly disappointed that I hadn't achieved a personal best, but I do also have the goal. So something that I would always play with and always fight with. But back to the point about lockdown and training and motivation, it's been really difficult, and even difficult for coaches, because as far as their programming is concerned, what have they got to program for? Because there's no competitions. So as far as their programming, they found it incredibly difficult to give us something to get our teeth into. There's no goalposts to aim for because they've all been taken away. So we had to kind of make our own, and that's how we overcame it. We set our own training goals, whether it be with road rides, like covering a certain section of a road in a quicker time, or a slightly slower heart rate, being more conditioned anaerobically. Those were the little goals that we set for ourselves. So my whole summer was based, because I moved from sprints to shot put to cycling, and I've been in cycling, in track cycling, for less than maybe 2 years. This summer was the first summer I'd had out on the road on a road bike. So it allowed me, even though I had no access to the gym, it allowed me to get a fundamental base of biking skills, because I could ride a bike, yes, but I couldn't really ride a bike because I hadn't been on one. I'd been on a static bike, I'd been on a watt bike or a turbo. I hadn't actually been out on the road learning how to stabilize my body whilst producing force through the pedals. You can't replicate that on a static bike. You need to be out on the bike to achieve that adaptation. So that was part of the process last year. Now we're getting into the business end of actually competing indoors. And although it's going to happen at some point in the future, we have been training in the velodrome in Manchester because we're in a fortunate position where elite athletes can still train. We have to go to work. We can't work from home. We have to go to work. So therefore, we've been exempt from the guidelines, which I'm really, really grateful for. It's allowed us to focus and push on towards competing in Tokyo. But now we're out in the program, because we're due to compete soon in a closed door competition that's been set up by British Cycling. We are now starting to enter what you would call a taper. So training that is of a higher quality and of a lower quantity. So we're training less, so the quality of the training is much higher, and it's geared towards sub-maximal and maximal efforts. So making sure the body is as fresh as possible. So when it comes to competition, it's not fatigued, and we are literally dialing in to the point of the event, which is my event. It's the kilometer, so it's a 4-lap sprint. It roughly lasts around 1 minute and 14 seconds, so it's a max effort that lasts that long. So if I were to do like a 2-hour road ride, there's no benefit for me being out on the road for 2 hours when I'm due to compete in literally less than a week and a half. So everything is tailored to producing maximum force and generating maximum power as quickly as possible, but making sure that the body stays fresh for doing that. So there's no fatigue. It's all geared to making sure that the performance is as good as it can be. And after that competition's happened, we'll then start to look into improving strength, whether that's going back into hypertrophy, so looking to building more muscle, which we can then turn into better strength, which can then turn into maybe a higher cadence on the bike, or improving my aerobic capacity or my anaerobic capacity. But right now, we're all centered to making sure that the body is as fresh as possible to produce a good time when it comes to competing. And the blocks kind of ebb and flow like that. Like the blocks will change. The blocks will have different themes and they'll have different goals based on the principle of improving each one to the point where the overall performance is better.
Yeah.
So it's like a pyramid effect. It's a pyramid effect. So the foundation of the pyramid gets bigger, which means the top of the pyramid gets stronger, and that's where everything is positioned going from now into games time, which is in less than 7 months now till games time.
And so for you, would you probably class the bottom of that pyramid as being your aerobic capacity, like just having the ability to be fit, physically recover, be in good condition health wise, maybe increase like your mitochondrial density, and then being able to pack on more muscle, more size, build more strength, and then you're working right to the top of that pyramid, which is going to be so like peak power and your anaerobic capacity, which, you know, that's where hopefully all of that culminates in 1 minute 14 seconds or less than that of pure trauma to the legs, heart and lungs to hopefully get a top result.
Yeah, it is. I would definitely describe it as trauma. That much I can certainly attest to. But the foundation of the pyramid is definitely the aerobic base. It's also the mobility, the stretching, the things that I do off the bike. So again, it all stems from track and field and athletics. So I still do a lot of the drills that I do before going into a sprint race on my feet that I do on the bike, because that breeds familiarity and comfort to me, because that's what I've done day in, day out. So for me, going through those drills, it's more of a mental key more than a physical key, because me doing those drills tells my brain, okay, it's time to go. It's time to train. It's time to compete. So that's what makes me feel comfortable. And an athlete can work best when they're comfortable. Like comfort, and I'm not necessarily comfortable in a point where they don't want to work hard. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that they create this environment for themselves within which they're familiar, environment within which they are familiar, which they're comfortable, which means they can relax. And a relaxed athlete, a relaxed muscle, is a muscle that can produce a lot more power than a muscle that's tense. A muscle that's tense can't move. A muscle that's relaxed can move. It can get the longest range of motion. It can produce the greatest force because it's relaxed. So a lot of the drills, a lot of the prep that I do is more for my brain, helping my brain switch off and going, okay, it's time to lock in. It's time to get focused. But at the same time, it calms me down and it breeds that familiarity that I need, that allows my body to relax and therefore produce do what I want it to do, which is to perform on the day, whether that be in training or on the track.
Yeah, I think that's a really good, really, really, really important point in terms of controlling, well, probably what we refer to as your level of arousal, not your level of, you know, horniness or whatever, but your level of state of arousal. And, you know, I think because this is something that I know in team sports, and you see about it, you hear about it in football and things like that, or American football, where, you know, you might be going into a big game and because you've got all these different personality types in the dressing room, you've got people who would, I'll take Roy Keane for an example. They would perform their best when they are maybe 8 or 9 out of 10 on the hyped up scale, not a 10 because they just go and get a red card because they'll break someone's leg. So you don't want them that ramped up. But then you've got other people who, they would be more responsive and perform to an even higher level. I'm thinking someone like Anthony Martial, for example, who's probably the most like laid back character, relaxed. You don't want to go and get in his face and start slapping him and headbutting him to wake him up, although you probably could do with it. But you've got to kind of factor that in and bear that in mind. And if you're an individual athlete, or if you are a footballer or whatever, you need to understand kind of like your mental state and your physical state that results in your best performance. If you're a 5 out of 10 on the arousal scale, don't go and get hyped up, have loads of caffeine and listen to, rock music blasting through your ears 2 minutes before walking out onto the pitch. Like, you've got to control those things and manage those things in your own time as well, don't you?
Yeah, that's something that I'm always really, really conscious of is, athletes are different. People are different. They prepare themselves to fight or fly in different ways. So I mean, one example that I can give is pre-game. I love students pre-game. After they do their warm up, their initial phases of warm up after coming out of the locker room, and they're hyping each other up and they're getting really excited, and like there's often questions of like, guys, where's the energy? Can I get some more energy? And then all that happens, all that hype game happens, and then what I like to do is that's my turn to kind of bring them in, and just calm everybody down. Like, just say, guys, let's not blow our load before the game, before the ball's even kicked, before we have kickoff. Okay, let's calm down. Let's focus on what we've got to do. Let's take this time now to go. And I do say to them, let's go through the motions. Let's get comfortable. Let's relax. There will be time. Trust me, there'll be time for you to get where you need to be in your headspace. But right now, we need to focus. Let's calm down. We got a job to do, and it's like any other day. I like to calm everyone down and just help them understand the process of being comfortable and familiar with your surroundings. And a lot of people don't, as you say, don't need a slap, don't need a helmet getting knocked off their face and getting hyped up. Like, if that's what you want to do, that's fine, and I can do that for you. I can be the quiet man, but I can also be the hype man. I can do both. But having an awareness of what to do in a particular situation, if you find an athlete, you have to understand what makes them tick. You can't, there's no one size fits all, and they all resonate with different things. So having an awareness of that is a really, really, really vital trait for any coach. Like, you have to understand what makes your athlete tick, whether that be in a training environment, whether in a competition environment. There's maybe you say things to them in a certain way, or you do things in a certain way, or you'd speak with them in a certain tone or using different language. The more you understand them, the more you'll get out of them, because everybody prepares for that fight or flight in very different ways, and the more you can understand that, the better your approach, and the better the outcome at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that's what we're in it for. We're in it for the performance, and hopefully, if the performance is right, the result handles itself. So, on that note, and something that you mentioned in probably about 10 minutes ago now, if you're at a games, obviously you go there to perform. You mentioned about if you won a gold medal, you'd be happy. Well, obviously very, very happy. But if you won a gold medal but you didn't get a PB, you'd be thinking, maybe a little bit disappointed. So my question for you, Sam, gold medal or PB? What are you picking?
Oh, you put me on the spot, and that's a really, really good question. I'm at the stage now where in my career where I'm getting sick and tired of going to the games and only having accreditation to show for it. So I'll happily take any color medal at this point. But I feel like I'm going to keep going until I feel like I've got what I want, which is a podium spot. Like, whether it's gold, whether it's silver, whether it's bronze, until I stop going faster and I start plateauing and I get to the games and I can't go any faster, that's when I'm going to say enough is enough. But when that point comes around, I'll know. But I would take the gold over the PB, because no one's going to remember the time you did. They're going to remember the color of the nail that's around your neck. So if I have to be, if you're going to push me, that's what I'm going to say.
Good. I'm glad you've given that answer, because I'd be talking you out of it if you were going and chasing a PB round. Hopefully a PB will result in a gold. Hopefully that'll be the case, and that'll be enough for you. One of the key things that I do want to kind of go back to and revisit a little bit is that first introduction to the elite athletics, from the moment you were at the Loughborough University Combine doing your 40 yard sprints, being spotted. I think you said it was December 2011, and then
December of that year.
Yeah, and then essentially 8 months later, you are stepping out onto the track in the Olympic Stadium in London, running in the 100 and the 200 meters. Just in whichever way you see fit, just summarize like kind of that journey, and like everything being packed into what I can only imagine was such a short space of time. It must have just felt mental.
Yeah, it was. I think that awareness of the performance environment, because it was such a very quick transition, didn't really hit me until I was actually selected for the team in July. I think a lot of the apprenticeship into track and field, which is what my coach Joe McDonald, his name is, that was the way it was paid to me. It's like, this is your apprenticeship. Like, you're going to learn now how to sprint. Everybody can run, but sprinting is a science. There's a way to do it, and there's a way to do it efficiently, and we're going to teach you how to do that. So that was a lot to learn initially. And then there was being classified. You have to be classified as a Paralympian. You have to be eligible. Your disability is essentially put into a box, and then you're put in an event, and into an event category with people that have similar impairment to you. So that was an interesting process too, understanding how my body fitted into the wider spectrum of the Paralympics. And then following on from that, it was being selected and then being put into the performance environment. So being on a holding camp, being taken to an environment which is geared specifically for your performance. So understanding how important it was to stay hydrated, how important it was to eat and prepare the right fuel in terms of carbohydrates, simple and complex, proteins and amino acids, supplementation, fruit and vegetables, amount of sleep you're getting per night, the training that you're doing. So why are we running over 60 meters and not 70 meters? Because we're working on this part of the transition into from your drive phase into your max speed. So everything is that was a huge learning curve for me, understanding that more about the process, and then leading that holding camp leading into the games as well. The logistics of being in the village. There are so many distractions, and athletes wanting to be in their own bubble and being so focused on performance. And no, don't walk. Why you walk? Like, you should be going from your room to food hall, and that's it. The village is not. It's not an amusement park. Like, what are you doing? You're here to do a job. You're here to compete. You should be off your feet. And so, yeah, the rule when it's games time and when you're in the village, the one rule is don't stand up when you can sit down, and don't sit down when you can lie down, because your body at that stage should be treated like it's a machine, and it has one job to do, and you have to treat it as such and prepare it as such. So that was the way the transition went from being initially spotted and being told I was talented and had talent for this sport, to the point where you're being introduced to a crowd of 80,000 people about to step into the blocks waiting for starters' orders, which probably is, to this day, remains the most nerve-wracking thing I think I've ever done in my entire life. My heart was in my mouth, and to go from like the noise that was at the level of jet engine in my ears to then hear silence for the gun, like for on your marks, set, and then the gun going off. Like in those 5 seconds where I could hear the breathing of my opponent in the blocks next to me. Like I heard his inhale of breath as he went from on your mark to set. yeah, like the quickest 14 seconds of my entire life just like went in a flash. But it was something that was very, 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 very special. But yeah, it was like a wild transition. Every time I think back to it as well, it's 8 years ago now where I made my debut for Great Britain, and it was really, really special. But a huge learning curve. Yeah, as I can only admit that it was difficult to go from. And there are times where I look at myself in the mirror, like, because obviously when you get the kit for the first time, you're trying it on, you're like, oh my god, this looks sick. It's like, oh mate, I'm GB now. There are times where I look at myself in the mirror and think, have I really earned this? Like, I'm about to compete for Great Britain for the first time, my senior international debut, and it's at a Paralympic Games, not just any Paralympic Games. We are the host nation. Like, athletes dream of doing this, like with their entire lives, to compete at this level and being the host nation. Think, have I really? Am I a fraud? Am I fake? Have I really earned this? So there were lots of questions leading up in that sense, but you don't get given the vest unless it's for a good reason. Like, someone obviously believes that you have earned it. So there was a lot of change in the perception that I had of myself through that process, and that's still happening to this day. I still look at the things that I've achieved, and I think, wow, has that really happened? I'm going to wake up soon and it's going to be a dream.
I mean, like you say, what a place and a time to make your debut. And what would you say has been probably, over your career so far, what's been your standout moment? Is it that moment in the fight, in that 100-meter run where you're walking out in front of 80,000 people, or is there something else?
It's hard to pinpoint a moment because as you say, I've done so much. London, Rio. I think it would have to be probably setting a personal best in the 200 meters. So 3 days after that 100, I went into the stadium again, and it was half full. It was the last event of the evening. People were going home for the night. Obviously, we're in London. People got tubes and trains to catch, but the noise was still loud, despite the stadium being half full, and people shouting like, "Come on, Sam!" Like, as I'm getting into the blocks, and like, people, they don't care like what your name is, where you come from. All they care about is the fact that you've got the Union Jack on your chest, and that's all everyone really cared about. And that was a huge boost to feel that energy. And like, as you come off the curve, as you come around the bend into the straight, like, the noise gets louder and louder, and that was that was huge. And my legs just kept going and going and going and going and going, and set that PB. And did it at home, and it was amazing. And I wish I could go through it again, just to see what it would feel like, just to go through that moment all over again. It was sick.
Yeah, that's class. That's absolutely class. And talk to me about, what was that moment like when you found out and you realized that you were selected for the team and you were going to be competing in London? What was that like? Who did you call first as well once you found out?
Yeah, so I was on my way to. I knew what day it was. I knew it was selection day. I was on my way to Tesco to go and get some food. I don't shop there anymore, by the way. I'm an Aldi guy now. I've seen the error of my ways, and I know where the real meals lie, and that is in Aldi. Like, trust me when I tell you that. So yeah, I was on my way to get some shopping, and the phone rings, and it's Peter Eriksson, who at the time was the head coach of the squad. I said, Sam, I'm happy to tell you we've selected you. You'll be going to London. Stay safe, stay out of trouble. We'll see you in Portugal for the holding camp. He puts the phone down. I lose my mind in silence. Obviously, I'm doing this like this little mousy squeal, and I'm literally, I can't believe what this phone call I've just had. And then obviously, the first person that I call is Mumsy. And within like 10 seconds of the call happening, like, I tell her, I was like, I'm going to the Paralympic Games. I'm going to represent the nation at the Paralympic Games. And she bursts into tears, like within hearing that news. She can't believe that her son of 22 at the time, this this child that was born and put in an incubator and fed via a test tube and had the head the size of a tennis ball, and the doctors told her that he wouldn't walk and he wouldn't run and it'd be a hopeless case, all of a sudden is now going to represent his country. Like, to her, that's unfathomable. And I know a lot, and the older I've gotten, the more I've learned to understand it, is that it doesn't matter how old you get, your mum still looks at you as if you're her baby. And that's never gonna, and that doesn't change. Whether I don't know whoever you're closer with, whether it's your dad, your mum, your auntie, your uncle, your grandma, your grand, whoever raised you, like, no matter how old you're gonna get, they're still gonna look at you as if you're a baby, because that's their first memory they had of you when you first arrived on the planet. They've known you for all their lives. Like, there's nothing that you can't say or do that's going to surprise them, because you're still their baby. So that was her first reaction, her first response. That was something we shared, and yeah, that's something that I won't forget, because that's something that is very, very, very special. Like, that's history books in itself. Like, no one can ever take that from an athlete. Like, you're on a team sheet at an Olympic and a Paralympic Games where your country was the host nation, you represented, and only a small percentage of people get to do that in a lifetime. So it was a very, very, very moving moment that we both shared. And yeah, it's yeah, thinking back on it now, I'm just thinking, wow. You know.
I mean, that's absolutely. I can only imagine as to how special that moment must have been for her. Like, with you probably stood in front of the milk at Tesco, you know, telling her that you're going to be representing the nation in the Paralympic Games in London. And, you know, for someone who, you know, considering she was given a frame that, you know, to help you walk, that she decided to chuck it in the loft and keep it away from you forever. And then, you know, possibly even told that, you know, you'd be in a wheelchair around the age of 20 or whatever it was. Like, for her, I mean, that I can't even begin to imagine how much that must have meant for her to see you be able to go and do that and live what is, you know, a dream for any athlete.
Yeah, and people have always asked. Some people in the press have asked the question of, like, what's it like to raise a Paralympian? And I'm always trying to say, like, this was never on the radar. Are you mad? Are you outside your mind? Like, it's just something that I never imagined for him to achieve. This is crazy. It was never on. And people ask me that question too. Like, is this something you've always wanted to do? I was like, no, I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Like, there's an element of luck to it as well. If I hadn't gone to that combine session, I wouldn't have met Joe. So it's very much a question of not necessarily being in the right place at the right time. Nobody is really in the right place at the right time. It just so happens that they tend to put themselves in those situations. There's no such thing. I mean, there is an element of luck in everything that we do, I think, but the phrase rings true that you make your own luck. The right place at the right time. You have to put yourself there in the first place, which is why we're having this conversation. And it scares me every single time to think that if I hadn't made, like, a really small decision, a lot of what's happening now would never have materialized. Like, imagine if I'd have stayed in bed during that combine session. Like, I'm not going to go because, you know, I don't feel like it, or, you know, I'm tired, or it's not compulsory. I don't have to be there. It's an optional extra. It's an optional extra for training. But if I hadn't turned up, I wouldn't have met Joe, and he wouldn't have asked me that question, and this journey would never have happened. So I'm always wondering, like, what if I hadn't had the really simple attitude, just like, today's a new day for me to challenge myself and see how far I've come. And that's been the driving aspect through everything that I've achieved so far. But that is also something that was instilled in me from the early stage when I was able to understand it. Like, if someone gives you an opportunity to do something, like, say yes. Like, because if you say no, what you're left with when you say no is nothing. And what can you do with nothing? Absolutely nothing. And my mum's had always told me that. It's just like, whilst you're still breathing and have the capacity to do so, like, treat yourself like as a commodity. Like, treat yourself as something something that is of value. And you have to spend that time wisely. You have to invest in yourself, because when you invest in yourself, you can withdraw. And when you're not investing in yourself, you're robbing yourself of the chance to show off, to show that you can achieve great things. So she's been instrumental in the whole thing. I mean, and my dad obviously has to get a little bit of a shout, even though he left a early on in my childhood, so I haven't really seen much of him in a couple of years. A bit of a waste man, if I'm honest. But if it weren't for him, I wouldn't be here either. So yeah, shout out Dad, waste the space. But my mum did get remarried, and to my stepdad, and he's practically my dad and everything but biological. And there's a lot that he's taught me as well, in terms of being level-headed and understanding what the world is like for growing up and from a teenage years, and new lessons being learned on. So it's not all her. There's a lot that's happened. A lot of other people have spent time and spent effort and put it into me. And I'm sure you're gonna kind of can understand that when someone does that, that's a really valuable thing. Like sometimes even that's more valuable than money. Sometimes effort and time are commodities, just like money is. Like you can choose to spend it or you can choose to waste it. So when people have chosen to spend their time and effort on me, I feel like I'm in debt to them. So I have to repay that back. And that's a lot of the motivation that I have as well when it comes to competing and training. Like even though I'm an athlete in an individual sport, I still like to think of myself as being part of a team, which again that's an element of thinking that's come from football. Like I'm part of a team, we're part of a wider team. So when I compete, we compete. I'm doing it for us, not just for me. I feel like that gives me an edge when it comes down to it. Like I'm very much a product of other people's time and effort, and it's not just it's we. Like we are doing this, and that makes everything much more potent.
Yeah, I think very often people are very, very bad at doing things for themselves. So if you do take on the view of, you're doing this to be part of a team, to help other people, so other people can benefit from your efforts and your endeavors, even though it might seem somewhat selfish. I think a lot of the time, general public, a lot of them, parents especially, will feel guilty for going out, doing a workout, working on themselves because they're leaving the kids. But in fact, as a family unit, as a team, that combination gets stronger by each person taking care of their own, the things that they need to do. I'm just thinking back to what you said about your mum answering the question of, what's it like to raise a Paralympian? I just think, wouldn't it be amazing if she just turned around and she went, yep, he was told he wasn't going to walk by 20, but I looked at the boy and thought, he's going to be an athlete. He's going to be an athlete. He's going to compete. He's going to play American football. He's going to hit, and he's going to do sport to such a high level for a career, not just as like a one-off thing, or a flash in the pan. But you've actually gone and made a living out of what some might say is pretty unfortunate circumstances that you were dealt with in the first place.
Yeah, but it's interesting when you talk about it in terms of a circumstance that you've been dealt with. Like when you get dealt a hand, you've got that hand. You just have to do your best with the cards that you've got. I mean, it's really that simple. And wishing things were different isn't going to change anything. And I told the guys this before we wrapped up training before Christmas, because we knew that lockdown, we had this prediction lockdown was imminent, and we kind of made peace with the fact it was going to be our last training session. And I said to the guys, like, wishing things were different isn't going to change anything. What you can do is control what's in your power to control and make the best of the situation that you're in. And that's something that I think, again, was underlying all of this. Like, just because I had cerebral palsy, it was never going to be an excuse to not do something. If anything, it was going to be an excuse to do more, and to show myself that that I can achieve, despite the limitations that have been put upon me. But again, if we think about it from I don't know where I'm at, like spiritually or religiously, but I like to think of it in terms of something was taken from me, and then something else was added in to replace that. Like, and I think it's probably my mental strength, my mental fortitude. Like, I may be impaired physically, but the price to pay on top of that was to have a mind that was strong. So I like to think of it in terms of that way, whether that's divine intervention or not. Everything happens for a reason, in my view, and the law of attraction applies. Like, if you want something, the universe will usually conspire to give it to you if you're prepared to work for it. Like, I genuinely believe that that's it. And in terms of being spiritual or believing in energy, I firmly believe that people, if you think it, you got to fake it till you make it. If you think it, it will generally materialize. Like those that say they can and those that say they can't are usually right.
Yeah, it's just which one do you want? What's the
Yeah.
most desirable result? Yeah. Oh man. Um, I was going to ask you something else, but it's completely slipped my mind now. Just thinking about everything that you've said there. But um, what would you say to anyone at the moment who feels like things are conspiring against them? And because I think to a degree everyone's going through a bit of a tough time. So you know, everyone's circumstances are all different. But what would you say is maybe a little bit of motivation or inspiration to possibly pick someone up at the current moment?
Yeah, I do have friends that are like that. Friends that are very glasses half empty as opposed to half full. And they do think they just can't catch a break, and luck is not on their side, and it doesn't last forever. That feeling, it does subside eventually. I mean, I've had phases where I felt that as well, like it's just not going my way. I've had months of being in a training slump where nothing has just seemed to work, and I figured that, and I questioned like giving up. I said, let's just do this. Maybe this just isn't for me. But I try and hold sight. I try and hold on to the fact that things have to improve, because that's initially what I want. Like I want things to improve, and I want things to get better. And my point that I made before still stands. If you want something badly enough, it will happen. But you have to not lose sight of the things that are important, and you can't do it on your own. I think that's the key point that I would raise to anyone that is struggling. There are other people that are in a situation that you are in too, and it helps to talk. Like, talk to someone, talk to anybody, family, friends. If it's not family and friends, like, find someone else that you can talk to it and engage with. Build a strong relationship. And what gives a relationship its value? Well, it's the things that you share and the things you participate in. So you can find common ground in success, but you can also find common ground in struggle. And very often through struggle, I find those that struggle are the ones that have the most success, because they understand what it was like for them when they were on rock bottom. Like, they know what that's like, so they appreciate this. They appreciate the success even more. And I believe wholeheartedly that the triumph is born from trauma. We've used that word trauma. Like, if you've come from a hard place, like a dark place, you appreciate the light even more. So yeah, I would say that just, it might be hard to stay. It's hard to stay positive in this time. It is, but take perspective from it, and talk to people. Like, if you need help, don't be afraid to ask for it. Like, in my view, someone asking for help, that's a sign of strength, not a sign of weak. You're not weak. If you ask for help, it's not because you're weak. Like, you've acknowledged that you need help, and that takes strength. That's a strong will. That takes willpower to admit to someone, I need your help, which is why you should always be willing to give it. And you never know when people might need help as well, because that red flag might come up from someone that you least expect it. So don't be surprised if it happens, especially with a friend you think is actually pretty mentally strong and they're dealing with it quite well. It could come round before you know it. So yeah, just ask for help. If you're struggling, ask someone to help you, because that'll be the thing that makes the difference.
Yeah, it takes a lot of courage for people to do that as well, doesn't it? Um, I think one of the key things that you nailed there is very simply going through some form of trauma or discomfort or pain, or whatever difficulty life kind of throws at you. Going through that, similar to you, I do believe it results in a far deeper level of resolve that will help you push through and go off and achieve anything that you set your mind to. I think if you're simply given everything, the fight, you've not had to do it. It's like if you go and win the lottery, you just go and blow it all, and that's it. Whereas if you've built an empire, built a business, and you manage to create that yourself, then you'll always be wealthy, and no one will take that away from you. I want to just be, because I know we're coming up to the end of our time together talking about this, and there's still so many questions that I've got. But one of the key things that I want to go back to is that moment where you were selected, you got the jersey, and you're like looking at your GB kit, thinking, questioning, have I earned this? And I think your story, your situation, your whole life, everything for me, I think it's almost a perfect example of you put yourself in the place to succeed. Other people will give you opportunities, but you've always put yourself in a position where something great could come off the back of it, whether it's from participating in sport and even being pit last and playing as a goalkeeper, developing hand-eye coordination, and you mentioned the competitive side, social skills involved with sport, going playing basketball, turning up to basketball trials at the start of university, then for some reason deciding that you're going to go and play American football, put on a lid and shoulder pads and start clattering into stuff, doing all those things and then turning up to the combine. I think, like you mentioned or you alluded to, there were so many little decisions involved in terms of putting you in the right place and being in that position to succeed. And then, ultimately being fortunate enough, because there's always an element of luck involved, but being able to step out on the track in front of 80,000 people who, 80,000 people in the stadium, but then the millions watching on TV who are desperate for you to see well. Like, what a journey. What a journey.
Yeah, it's mad. When I think about it, which is it's been really good to look back at things in retrospect, and in hindsight. It's yeah, you're right. It's a lot of little decisions that I've made that have had a really, really, really big impact. But I can't underestimate the impact of other people that have had the chance to help shape the journey and facilitate it. Like, I remember going to the AU Bazaar to go around looking around other sports, and I knew I was looking for American football. I knew I was. And James Roberts, JR, one of the linemen, I didn't know who he was at the time, but introduced himself to me and said, "Oh, you should come play for us. You look pretty athletic." And that's the first time anyone ever looked at me and said I looked athletic, because I never really looked at myself and thought of myself that way. But he was obviously laying on thick for me because he wanted me to sign up to the team. But it was little comments and little hints and tips from people like that that gave me the confidence in myself that I needed to commit to what I was trying to achieve. Because there've been times where I've doubted myself and questioned whether I'm good enough for this or I'm good enough for that. And very often the tipping point, the part that gave me the strength to carry on, was other people's words and help. So it's much to them pushing me as much as me pushing myself. But when it comes down to it, it's still you that has to step out. It's still you that has to walk out. It's still you that has to put yourself in that position. So you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So it's a lot of what I've achieved is a product of other people's time and effort and little bits and pieces. But I had to put it into action. I'm going to continue to do that as much as possible. Lockdown or no lockdown, I'm going to keep pushing.
Absolutely.
There's nothing else to do. And I'm not scared. I'm not scared of death. I'm at peace with the fact that we all share the same fate. Eventually, we're gonna. Unfortunately, it's sad. We're gonna leave the planet, and it's gonna carry on without us. Unfortunately, and I'm a firm believer that there's plenty of time to rest when you get laid to rest for good. So rather than you wishing that things were different or things are going my way, like in however many years' time, the world will go on without you. So whilst you're here, you may as well make the most of it.
Absolutely. I think that's a perfect way of looking at it. Anyway, you're doing amazing things, and obviously, rather than just being an athlete right now, you're already giving back. So you're already in that giving back phase. And obviously, I am so appreciative of your time and coming on here and spending a couple of hours chatting away to me. Next time you're back up in Manchester, when we're allowed to do it, if you're at the Velo, come round the house and we'll get a meal and we'll get you fed and watered.
Yeah,
And it'll be great to
I,
have to sit down. But
and thanks for the opportunity as well. It's been great for me, and I hope everyone's enjoyed a little bit of an insight into the mental mind of Sam Ruddock.
I'm sure, I'm 100% certain that they will. I mean, it's been an absolute pleasure for me to sit down and chat with you. And I just hope, I really, really do hope that you get to compete this year and you get to go to Tokyo and that you go well, come back with a medal. So best,
bro.
Well, best of luck for that, and yeah, good luck.
Thanks, man. We'll do our best.
Cheers, Sam. Right, well, there we have it. That concludes my 2 hour, I think at least about 2 hour discussion, burrowing into the mind of Sam Ruddock and the inner workings of what it's like being an athlete, the mentality, and obviously all the things that he's had to overcome. So hopefully you found that an inspiring conversation, an inspiring little chat. Sam is an absolutely top class guy, so make sure you have a look out for him on social media. Follow him, support him. Obviously during the Paralympics coming up, hopefully this year. So we wish Sam all the best, and make sure you take note of some of the key lessons that he's kind of preached there, and some of the things that he lives by. Apply it to your own life, and go and get results. Go and get results. Enjoy yourself, and give yourself a high level of value, because you are definitely worth it. So to try and avoid quoting a shampoo advert, go and do yourself justice. Go and earn it. Get to the grind and keep plugging away. Even if you feel like things aren't working for you at the moment, don't quit. Keep pushing. Anyway, that is it from me for now. So hopefully you've enjoyed this podcast episode. I will be back again soon, so keep your eyes and ears peeled. Again, make sure you give us a like, leave us a good review, and obviously support us, and then share this with anyone who you feel would benefit or would want to listen. And we will continue to come and bring you stories like Sam's, inspirational guys, inspirational people, and obviously as many training tips, health tips that we possibly can. So for now, that is it. Lenko out.